It's a package of bills. The big, bold, transformative one is the Reproductive Healthcare Leave Act. It's truly first of its kind and would provide 12 days of paid leave for symptoms related to any reproductive health conditions and procedures.
The list of what this legislation is proposing is what I want for Christmas. It's like you're checking all my boxes here.
What's happening to your body, we don't know, because we've never really studied the female. Say it's all in my head, but the research is quite spotty. No, we've never really studied the female body. I go to the doctor to get dismissed. Try losing weight, you're just anxious. That's fine, that's cool, I'm not pissed. Just wait 10 years for a diagnosis. Psychosomatic, you're so dramatic. Hysterical, emotional, hormonal, erratic. Heart disease, chronic fatigue, depression and anxiety. Do you have pain? No, you don't, because we've never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to CRAMPED, the podcast where I try to find answers to my and other people's questions about their period pain. I'm your host, Kate Helen Downey. I hope that listening to this podcast feels like meeting up with me at your local bar. And sometimes I bring friends, and sometimes those friends are Congresswomen. So while we're hanging out at this bar, go on over to the CRAMPED and buy me the cheapest drink you've ever seen once a month. When you support CRAMPED at a paid level, you not only pay my currently very small paycheck, you also get perks. You could hop on a Zoom with us once a month. You can vote on episode topics and suggest your own. And at $25 a month, you can even assign me a research question once a month personally. If anything you've learned on this show has helped you make better healthcare decisions, taught you about an option you didn't otherwise know was available to you, or just made you feel less alone, and you feel that that is worth a few bucks a month, head on over to patreon.com/cramped. All right, let's get into maybe the highest profile conversation I have ever had. With a quick reminder, I am not a doctor, this is not medical advice, nor is it legal advice. I am just a research nerd with a uterus and a microphone sharing what I've found. And today, what I have found is something good happening in our government? Let me check my notes. Yeah, something good might be happening in the government. Our government. There is a package of legislation that recently got introduced to Congress called the HER Agenda. It is a set of bills that proposes a lot of the things that I have been yelling about on this podcast for over a year now. Menstrual leave, pain management for routine gynecological procedures, and more research and public education on women's health conditions. Seeing as I am not trying to get another DIY degree in a subject like government or lawmaking, I just called up the Congresswoman who introduced this legislation, and I asked her all my questions.
Hi, everyone. This is Yassamin Ansari. I am the Congresswoman from Phoenix, Arizona.
Yassamin, tell me about your period pain.
Oh, man. Okay. So I, unfortunately, am one of the not so rare women who deal with very debilitating period pain to the point where, honestly, it might be endometriosis. I just have never taken the many, many steps that it takes to properly diagnose that. But I've always dealt with really awful pain, but there have been a number of times in my life where I realized just how bad it was. The experience that I will never forget is back in the kind of early days of my professional career. I had just moved to New York. I think it was summer of 2015. And I was working in climate policy at the UN at the time. And I actually wrote an op-ed about this experience because it was pretty traumatizing. It was like a weekend morning, and I had just gone down to the local bodega to grab something. And I remember being drenched in sweat. It was summer, it was hot. But before I knew it, I felt super sick and passed out and woke up, had a couple of male paramedics hovered around me. They brought me into one of their smaller ambulance-style cars. And I remember they just would keep asking me, like, are you pregnant? No, I'm not pregnant. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not pregnant? Is there any chance you could be pregnant? I know I'm not pregnant. It doesn't really matter if you ask me 10 times.
Right.
And no, I just like, and they're just like, they were so perplexed. What is wrong with this lady? And the truth is I had passed out because the pain had gotten so awful. And I think combined with the heat and all of that, I just couldn't take it. And I've had that experience a number of times since then. Like something that embarrassing happened relatively recently as well. I was literally getting my hair done and had the foils in my hair for the highlights.
Oh.
And I just hadn't had, for me, I will have to take 4 or 5 Advils to like make the pain even just, it's still there, but even then just make it tolerable. And I had gotten there. I think I literally just got my period. I asked for Advil. They said that they couldn't give Advil to customers. And within an hour, the pain was so awful that I told my hair person, like, I need to go to the bathroom. Like, I don't feel well. And he's like, it's not going to work. I'm like, I'm telling you, like, I really need to get up. I got up and then I passed out as I was walking because I just blacked out. So anyways, I know it's not unique. And I think why this subject has been so compelling to me for so long is just that it's something that every woman deals with, and we essentially don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's what is so unacceptable and baffling to me still.
Yeah, everything that you're saying, I relate to. I've had those experiences. I tend to throw up for a long time before I pass out. I think most of the people listening will relate a lot to that story and to the idea that, like, why don't we talk about this more? Why did I feel so alone in this for so long when statistically so many people around me are actually dealing with the same thing? And why aren't my doctors? I was researching something this morning and I came across a new, like a medication that has existed for a really long time and is FDA approved for severe period pain that my doctor never prescribed me. And I'm like, why?
Wow.
Why?
I've never heard of any medication specifically for this. Other than, of course, they will always tell you, are you on birth control? And then you have to get into the whole birth control conversation. And I don't know.
Like, it's just a stronger NSAID. It's not exactly the same as ibuprofen. It works on a slightly different pathway, but it is just another NSAID that is prescription only. But there are like different varieties. And it's like some work for some people, some work for other people. And it's like, I never heard of them. And I've been researching the show for 2 years. And this was the first time I ever heard of it. And it's like, why isn't that more well known? And I found it on Reddit.
Wow.
Other people were posting about it. And then I looked it up and it's, there are 2 different FDA approved NSAIDs that I had never heard of, approved specifically for period pain. And none of the dozens of doctors I ever saw were like, I don't know, let's try this. I realized I never said the name of those medications in this conversation, and I hate to interrupt the Congresswoman, but I will never be able to sleep again if I don't give you the full information. That is my curse. The names of the prescription-only NSAIDs that are FDA approved to treat severe period pain are mefenamic acid, also known as Ponstel, and diclofenac, also known as Voltaren. Okay, did you write that down? Don't worry, I am working on a full episode with a pharmacologist about all the different drugs that could possibly treat period pain. More on that soon. Okay, back to Representative Ansari.
We've done a few roundtables in our district and in DC on the topic, and there were a couple doctors that came to the one we did in Phoenix who had been working on this issue for many years, et cetera, et cetera. But they were really able to shed light on the fact of, and we know this, but how there's such a discrepancy between the amount of money that's spent on research and solutions for women's reproductive pain issues, et cetera, versus men.
Yeah.
Like doctors are just, they don't have the resources as well, right?
Yes. And the education is not great. It's not each individual doctor's fault that they don't know about all this stuff, but it is crazy that we're in a system that fails us so spectacularly at almost every step. So you recently introduced a set of legislation to Congress called, is it called the HER agenda, the HER agenda? How do you talk about it?
I say the HER agenda, but it is an acronym, and it's the Health, Equity, and Rights Agenda.
Yeah. So that just got introduced at the end of March?
Correct. Yeah, it was springtime.
Okay, can you tell us what is included in this package of legislation?
Yeah, and thank you for letting us showcase it, because we actually worked on it for quite a long time to make sure to get it right and make sure that we're addressing the variety of issues. And so we worked with doctors. We also worked with organizations like Planned Parenthood and Reproductive Freedom for All and so many others, now the National Organization for Women, to make sure we're really addressing longstanding gaps in equities in women's healthcare. And the focus in particular is on autonomy, pain management, and workplace protection. So it's a package of bills. It includes a number of bills. The one that is the most, I would say, The big, bold, transformative one is the Reproductive Healthcare Leave Act. It's truly first of its kind and would provide 12 days of paid leave for symptoms related to any reproductive health conditions and procedures. And I say any because men are not excluded.
Right.
It could include anything from menstrual pain, menopause, endometriosis, IUD insertion, pregnancy terminations, vasectomies, and fertility treatments. All of us have to deal with numbers of issues, and it shouldn't be this secret hidden thing where we are having to first take away from our normal sick days that are already so limited.
Right.
But these are issues that each and every human being in this country has to deal with. And some other countries around the world have enacted policies that are similar. Australia, Spain, that we would not be the first, but I think the idea is super important. The others have to do with studying pain. So the Gynecological Pain Management Study Act would direct the Secretary of Health and Human Services to more precisely identify the barriers to pain management options during and after gynecological procedures. For example, IUD insertion, I think, is something that many women often have complications with. Another issue that is not often talked about. We act like it's like a very easy, simple thing to do. And ideally, most of the time it is.
It's that classic thing that they tell you anytime you go in for any procedure, a biopsy, IUD insertion. I just had an HSG test done where they put a catheter through your cervix. And every time, no matter what they do, they always tell you it's just going to be a little bit of cramping pain, like when you get your period. And I'm like, first of all, that's very bad pain for me. So that's not a good thing. And second of all, you don't know what it's going to be. It could be I got 2 HSGs done, 2 of these tests a year apart. One of them I had no pain, and the other one I had a huge reaction and basically had like the worst cramps that I get. And they had nothing. They had told me take an ibuprofen an hour beforehand, and it's no anesthesia. You're like, can you imagine asking a man to do a procedure like that with no anesthesia, no local, nothing? So crazy.
This could be a whole conversation, but since I've been on this topic for the last decade or so, every person I've ever dated, I go above and beyond to explain to them how this is so awful and they have no idea.
Yeah.
I do my best to educate the men.
Yeah. So, okay, that's the 2. We've got menstrual leave and researching when you say researching gynecological procedures and pain management, does that mean looking into what is currently done for pain management, or finding new ways to manage pain and recommending those to doctors?
Exactly. All of the above.
Okay.
So what are the barriers? And so the procedures could include everything you just said: IUD insertion, endometrial biopsies, cancer screenings. Yeah. But it would also require that the report include legislative or administrative recommendations so that we can actually close the gaps. And you, again, said exactly the issue, which is that countless patients have cited only ever being offered ibuprofen for these types of procedures. And last year, actually, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists released new guidelines for pain management during some of these procedures, and they cited an urgent need for more advancement on these fronts. So we worked very closely with them on this particular bill.
That's awesome. What's the third bill in the legislative package?
So the third one is about PMDD, which is, the full name is the Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder Awareness and Research Act. Wow. This one would direct the National Institute of Health to research and provide educational materials on PMDD and to fund clinical trials on potential treatments. For those who don't know, PMDD is a very severe form of PMS. It does affect somewhere between 3 to 7.7% of women. And it is very, from what I have researched and read, and I don't know if I know anyone personally who has it, but it can cause severe symptoms of anger and irritability, depression, anxiety, and even go so far as causing suicidal thoughts and behavior. So it is very understudied, underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed. Sometimes people have PMDD and they're diagnosed with bipolar disorder just due to a lack of awareness in both as we discussed earlier, in both doctors and patients. So excited about that one as well. And a lot of work to do to move these forward, but I have been encouraged to see the reaction that we've gotten from so many women across this country, and just a lot of what legislation and moving stuff like this forward requires is changing the conversation. And so that is the beginning stages of where we're at right now.
That's amazing. This is truly the list of what this legislation is proposing is what I want for Christmas. It's like you're checking all my boxes here. I've been like deep in this research for a couple years now. There are so many things that women's health is behind on, right? There's so many ways that medicine and legislation has been failing people with uteruses. How did you and your team prioritize these 3 items for this legislation package over all the other stuff?
You know, I'll be the first to recognize this is just scratching the surface. Obviously, there are so many issues, but we had an intern on our team last summer who is this woman named Zoe. So I have to give her props. I've known Zoe since she was in high school. And she started as an intern in my city council office and quite literally has come with me every step of the way. And she got really into it. She has her own personal stories. And we start by engaging with organizations that are trusted, with groups like ACOG, the Association of the Gynecologists, et cetera, with organizations like the National Organization for Women who do this kind of work, to just suss out where they feel the needs are. We came in with our own set of ideas, right? And then we really worked with these groups to move them forward and really make sure we're constructing them in a way that leads to real outcomes and recommendations that can help close the gaps. So that's why I think it took longer than any other bills that I've introduced, because we really wanted to get it right. We worked on the package for about a year before we ultimately were at a place to move forward. But I will say, since then, we have had events in the district where we've brought together doctors and patients, other community leaders. And one, it was very cathartic to be able to talk about these issues in such an open way, but it definitely does make you realize how much more there is to do as well.
Yeah. And that's not a criticism. We need truly a whole world's worth of effort to close this gap and to correct the neglect that women's health has seen. So that's not a criticism of these 3 bills, but more of just like, I get so overwhelmed thinking about how much needs to get done. I can't imagine what it was like to go through the process of deciding what you were going to focus on this legislative package. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Because we never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to Cramped. We are talking with Representative Yassamin Ansari, who recently introduced a package of legislation to the U.S. Congress that would include so many amazing things that would help close the gap in women's health care. Things like 12 full days of reproductive health leave. Things like new recommendations for pain management with routine gynecological procedures. Things like more research into conditions that are literally killing people. So let's dive back into this conversation with Representative Ansari. We were just talking about this, but there are so many of us suffering, right? There are so many of us in this position. I think one of the more generous stats that I've seen in the meta studies is up to 30% of menstruating people experience debilitating pain with their period. When I think about, I've never really thought about it, but the people who represent me in the government, that percentage of the people they're representing are in this severe pain and have this unmet need and this way that the healthcare system is failing them. Why do you think it's so rare to see legislation like this? As far as I know, legislation like this for these topics has never been introduced into Congress before. And if it has, it hasn't passed. So why do you think that's so rare when period pain, severe debilitating period pain, is so widespread and so common?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. I think the overarching reason is that for the longest time, I think women have been forced, based on what societal norms are about reproductive issues, to not really talk about any of this, right? I don't even feel like I talked about this so openly until my mid-20s, probably. Yeah. And then my best friend and I started exchanging notes and realized, wow, we both go through hell for a couple of days every single month. Yeah. And we started doing the math on like how much of our lives were consumed by this.
Right?
And then, so it's just in regular society, it is just more rare for women to be very open about. If you are feeling the horrific pain that you yourself talked about, how many women are telling their bosses, like, hey, I need to come into work late or take a few hours because I have period pain? Most likely you just say, I don't feel well,
Right.
or I am sick. Yeah. And it is worse than my worst illnesses, to be honest.
Right.
But I think that is the huge reason for it, that it's just not discussed. And then, of course, it goes without saying that if you look at representation in Congress, it is certainly not reflective of the country in terms of gender parity. We are still, Congress is about 25% women at this point. We are on the Democratic side hoping to pass having 100 women. We're at 90 some right now. And then I think it is generational to an extent. There are not many of us in our 30s or even 40s. It's changing now. And I think with it, I think the type of legislation that you're seeing will change as well. There are amazing women members of Congress who have been leaders on reproductive issues more broadly, right? Like abortion access and our right to choose. But getting into these sorts of issues, I think, is largely newer. And then finally, again, when it comes to representation, and I certainly don't come from a medical background, but we don't have that many healthcare professionals either in office.
That makes sense.
And that makes a huge difference too. There is an OBGYN in my class, Representative Kelly Morrison from Minnesota. She's awesome. Like having her has been great. She's a co-sponsor of these bills. You know, she's a real leader too. But I just think generally we need to obviously elect more women and elect more healthcare professionals who really understand the gaps here as well.
That's fascinating. I forgot you could be a doctor and then be a congressperson. Like,
yeah,
that was an option.
It's crazy. There's another woman in my class, Maxine Dexter from Oregon, and she was like an emergency room physician, like like attending, saving lives. Obviously, she can't do that now because the schedule's crazy. But yeah, a huge reason she decided to run was her experiences in that field.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I feel like we need more of that. That's awesome. Okay. So as someone whose major touch point for how a bill becomes law is that Schoolhouse Rock song, can you give me an overview of what happens with the Her agenda from here on out? What path is it going to take through the process? How could it become law?
Yes. So I'll get into the nerdy nitty-gritty of it all. But
please.
Very fundamentally, any bill in Congress to get a hearing or to be considered, that goes through the majority party. And that applies to every piece of legislation and pretty much everything. Right now, Republicans are in the majority, both in the House and in the Senate. So they decide what bills get to kind of see the light of day at this point in time. That's important. That makes things more challenging no matter what issue you're talking about when you're in the minority party, because it's politics at the end of the day. And everyone who's in the majority wants to make sure their members have the wins that they want. And so they're prioritizing Republican-led bills. Now, that being said, most legislation, for folks to understand, like especially bigger legislation, like big shifts in our society, it is rare for anything to move forward in a term or even 2 terms or sometimes 3 terms. You really have to build momentum around it. Public pressure is very important. And your representatives have to feel like they have the support and the backing of their constituents to move forward. So where my hope is here is that as I hope that Democrats take back the majority next Congress, that we can continue to build support and make sure that these bills get a hearing in the appropriate committee. Most likely that would be the Energy and Commerce Committee. That's where healthcare issues are discussed. So that is the other way this works in terms of what committee a bill goes through. We have everything from the Oversight Committee to Science and Technology to Appropriations. That's where money gets allocated. There's 24 committees or so in Congress, and each member typically sits on 2 of them. So we are at this point working really hard to get as many co-sponsors as possible. And that's where, if folks listening are excited and supportive, call your members of Congress. Let them know that you want them to sign on to one or all of the bills that are part of the HER agenda. And you can let them know why and any personal stories, but you don't even have to do that. And for awareness for people, because I get asked this all the time, like, how much do members of Congress listen when people call or email? And honestly, it is way more than you would think. Like, I take that very seriously. I think most people do, because that's a real pulse check on where your constituents are at. If I'm getting dozens of calls or sometimes even hundreds on an issue, that makes very clear to me that this is something that people care about and that I need to be a leader on.
Really? So even dozens of calls? Because I think of, if I'm calling my congressperson, my representative, like hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people must be calling them about this issue. Would it really make a difference if I called and left a message saying, I support this or I don't support this, or talk to the person answering phones for them? But when you say dozens, that makes me think, if there's 30 people calling, like, I could be one of those 30 people.
Yeah, no, 30 is a lot, especially on something like this. The only time you would see this overwhelming, like hundreds and hundreds or even thousands, would be something for super high stakes. And usually the offices that would be getting those are like the people that are on the fence. And there's a bunch of social media push, like, call this person because this person is the one vote we need, right? On a Supreme Court nomination, or on stuff like last year's Trump's big bill that cut healthcare. Yeah, some offices were getting a million calls about that, right?
Right.
But for a specific bill on a very targeted issue, 30 would be a lot.
Wow. And so does it matter who, like, if I live in Los Angeles, does calling my representative help this bill? Or is it more like targeting the specific representatives who you're targeting to come on as co-sponsors?
Because of the stage that we are at with this, where I think we have a couple dozen co-sponsors, that means there are many members who are not on the bill yet. And so looking up your own member and seeing whether they have signed on, and if they haven't, calling them can go a long way. But overall, yes, as a member, I am more so looking at if my own constituents are calling about something, of course.
Right.
Every office, I think, does that comparison of what zip codes are these calls coming from.
Yeah, totally. It seems like an issue like this, with the prevalence of dysmenorrhea, the prevalence of severe period pain being so high, some Republicans must feel it too. And it seems like this is an issue that on its own could and should be a across the aisle issue. But because it's women's health, it feels like it's not going to be. Do you feel like there's any path forward to make it an aisle crossing issue?
Absolutely. I think especially on the second two bills, I wouldn't refer to those as sweeping changes in our healthcare policy, right? The healthcare leave bill is quite ambitious, and really that's the one that really caused Fox News, for example, to decide to chime in and be mad about. But
menstrual leave is very controversial. I did a whole episode just about the idea of menstrual leave earlier this year because I had never heard of it before, and I was like, other countries have this already? Like, other countries will let you take the day off if you're dying from period pain and not use one of your like very few sick days? This is incredible.
And what a novel, what a crazy concept.
Yeah, to actually like have some give for real issues that many real people are having. Ugh. But yes, in this country, it has been extremely controversial, and there's always the pushback of, then companies won't hire women because they might have to give them more paid days off. And it's like, whose fault is that?
It's absurd. There's countless studies about the just economic impacts and where that would be. And yeah, I know, preaching to the choir, but their arguments fall flat.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that if you can't get behind bills that are focused on working within our own agencies, within Health and Human Services and NIH, et cetera. And now, granted, this current administration has gutted these two, and they're pretty anti-science and trying to really roll back a lot of research so that the context matters. But in a normal environment, I think that there's no reason either of the two pain management study acts couldn't get support from Republicans as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So aside from calling our reps, especially if we live in places with Democratic representatives who have not yet signed on, or either way, right? Can you have a Republican?
Yeah.
So,
and that would be the most helpful in this Congress.
Cool. Okay. So if people listening, if her agenda is also everything that is on your Christmas list as a listener, you should go look up your representatives in the area that you live, and whether they are Democratic or Republican, you should look and see if they are already co-signing the her agenda or any of the individual bills. And if they are not, give their office a call and tell them why you want them to support this agenda, whether that's a personal story of yours, whether that's the stats you know from this podcast of how many people are living with debilitating period pain and how it affects their lives. Tell them you care about this issue and this matters a lot to you. Anything else that you want to encourage people to do to support this legislation?
Talk to your friends. I think that talk to your friends and family, other women. We all understand this issue so intimately. And I think the more we can let people know that there are laws that could be passed at the national level to help, I think would go a long way. I think we just need to really publicize this in a way and socialize it among people who even don't pay attention to politics as closely. Yeah. So that would go a long way. Of course, if you're on social media, posting more, letting people know. It's been cool to see. I've seen a couple videos pop up of just women talking about their own experiences and what this means to them. And I think if you'd be willing to share something like that would go a long way.
And who can they tag if they do decide to record a video or a post talking about their experience and this legislation? Who do they tag?
Tag our official account, which is at Rep, R-E-P, Yass, which is short for my name, Yassamin, Y-A-S-S, Ansari, A-N-S-A-R-I. We're on all of the platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, etc. And we will share it and we will put it out there. If you want to do, folks listening are interested in this topic and want to chat with us or have an idea of how to get it out there, we're super open and really want to get into spaces, again, where it doesn't even have to be a political space. This should not be political, actually. This is quite a normal reality for all of us and something that we should not have to deal with in a way that is so understudied, under-researched, and without solutions.
Yeah. Yassamin, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I know you are so busy, and I'm so happy that you are out there in the halls of government representing all of us crampers and getting some really cool stuff done.
Thank you, Kate.
I spend a lot of time on this podcast listing and picking apart and following the thread of why are things so bad for us? How did they get so bad? Why is there not more help for us? This feels like such an exciting moment to be able to go this could change. Somebody's doing it. Somebody's in there doing the things that need to get done to change the way things are. That has made all of us suffer in silence and suffer alone so much. So I am so happy that you're in there doing that, and we are going to help as much as we possibly can.
I think that we are going to really change things. This is the first step. And for future generations of women, I think we can do a lot.
Yes. All right, Crampers, there is a link in the show notes that goes to Representative Ansari's site. There is also a link in the show notes to a site where you can look up who your representative is and how to call or email them. I didn't want to say this while the Congresswoman could hear me, but one of my favorite bitchy little things to do is have a glass of wine and call my reps. Remember, they literally work for you. Your tax dollars that get taken out of your paycheck is what pays their salaries. It is their job to listen to what matters to you. You don't have to be perfect or articulate or reading from a script written by an activist, although that's fine. You can just call them and tell them what you want from them and why, like you're talking to a friend or a bad assistant. If the last decade of politics has shown us anything, we can be a lot more casual when it comes to dealing with our government. Take your rage and your sense of unfairness and your stories and point it towards the person you pay to represent you and your needs in our government. You can just have a glass of wine and tell them your period pain stories. Don't pass up this golden opportunity. If you have learned anything while listening to this episode or any previous episode, please become a paid subscriber on Patreon. I make these episodes free because I want everyone to have access to the information they need in order to advocate for themselves, whether it's in the doctor's office or in the halls of our government. But I do need the people who can afford $5, $10, or $25 a month to go kick that money in so that I can keep making this show and bringing you information. Your representatives work for you, and so do I, baby. And if you can't afford $5 a month, that's okay. Join as a free member so that I can point at all those free members on the Patreon and say, look, this is valuable. People need this. Thank you for being here, Crampers. I love you. I'll see you soon.
What's happening to your body? We don't know because we've never really studied the female body.